David Feldman-Makrias here. Guys, it happened. It is July 5th. We finally have our first full few days glimpses of data from Google Analytics 4 alone. No more Universal Analytics. So what's happening? I was eager to kind of look at, over the weekend, over the 4th of July holiday too, like, what's happening, but figured needed a couple days to process certain things. So I don't know, let's just take a snapshot. This is one of my active clients. We use Google Analytics quite often, right? And so what's happening? Well, there's 21 users in the last 30 minutes. We have audience data. We have first user source data. There's some weird stuff coming from out of the country, which doesn't really make a lot of sense. But, well, what if I notice from this compared to Universal Analytics data? Again, this is real time. I could see that there's real people coming to the site. This is something we have to look into. And I've always been kind of questioning, okay, is GA4 reporting everything appropriately? I've seen a lot of weird things happen with Google all over its properties in the last 2 to 3 months as we've been anticipating this move to GA4. So I guess one of the first questions is, how do we determine the relevancy of GA4? How do we know it's tracking the right things? How do we know we can trust it? Well, we have to measure a baseline, right? We have to get some sort of baseline so that we know, okay, what do we have versus what can we compare it to? Well, we do have Universal Analytics. And by the way, if you have not created a GA4 property and you use Google Analytics in some shape, form, fashion, even if you don't use it and you use some other third-party tool, highly recommend that you have it anyways, because a lot of that data can sync back to Google campaigns if you have them, because there's native integrations. But let's look at some time frame comparisons. Okay, so looking at, what am I looking at? July 1st through the 4th versus June 1st through 4th. One of the reasons I'm not looking at previous year is because the market was very different for this client. A. B. I didn't have revenue tracking installed on GA4 correctly last July. We did in June. So that's part of the reason we're looking month over month. I do like looking at the traffic acquisition report, at least from an advertising perspective. And what we can see is we see organic traffic, Google Ads traffic, direct traffic. Those remain the top three sources of users by session to the site. Then we have Bing Ads and DuckDuckGo. A little more in Google Organic, a little bit less in Google Ads. But I more so want to look at other metrics too. Like, these are just overall users. Shows we're up by about 1%. We see that big uptick in Google Organic. We see Google Ads a little bit down. And then we scroll all the way to the right, we can see revenue. It looks like $3,200 in revenue versus $3,200 in revenue, which is pretty accurate because we've spent about the same amount of money as we did last month at this time. And honestly, 4 days of data isn't super, like, you can't really go off a lot, right? So things seem pretty consistent, pretty stable as far as traffic. Now, one thing to determine that is, should we look at, we need to look at Universal Analytics and see what's going on in Universal Analytics, because we still have access to that. All right, now we're in Universal Analytics for the same client. Note, I am looking at first through the 4th of July versus the 1st through 4th of July previous year. And, I got the banner up here, July 1. We're not processing data anymore in Universal Analytics. Here's the funny thing, though. They are. Like, why? Why are they processing data? They just told us they weren't, but they are. And it's showing website activity, right? It's showing that we have users to the site. I thought everything would just go to nothing, right? It would just be zeroed out. We wouldn't see anything. That is not necessarily the case. It shows a lot. It shows less than the previous year, but let me actually line up the previous month, because that's what GA4 was comparing. So now I'm at June 1st through June 4th of this year. We show the same. Google Analytics, Universal Analytics is still processing data. Why? Is it like a rollout? Like, I shouldn't see anything on here, right? That's what I expected, not to see anything, let alone see revenue processing and transaction processing and everything. Like we see everything on here, and user activity looks pretty consistent, revenue looks pretty consistent. They're all around the same tracking. So what, Google? What are you doing? I thought that you were going to stop GA4. Or I'm sorry, stop Universal Analytics. Google. I don't know sometimes. I really think a bigger competitor needs to get Google and break this stuff up, man. Because it's like, you know, maybe they're rolling it out. Maybe I'm not educated to that. Maybe I just wrongly assumed that they would not process data, but they're processing data, which is odd. It's very odd to me. Okay. Well, that's what it is for the first 4 days. Google is doing something that it said it wasn't going to do. Wow. Shocking. So the sarcasm is just oozing out. It's oozing. So I hope this brings some insight. We'll be looking at this over the next week, 2 weeks. I would imagine, I guess it's probably rolled out, so it's going to go to zero at some point, but evidently it hasn't yet. So I can't really validate anything. Let me know in the comments if you guys are experiencing anything different. Want to know if other websites, other clients, anybody else, are you experiencing the same thing? Thanks so much.